When I saw her wedding invitation on my kitchen counter, my hands started to tremble. Not because of the gold embossed edges or the sweet cursive writing that read, "To my dearest friend, please stand by my side on the happiest day of my life," but because of the name written beneath hers, Daniel Carter, my ex-husband. For a long moment, I just stood there, my reflection shimmering faintly off the marble countertop. My heart thudded against my ribs like a warning I hadn't wanted to hear. The morning light through the blinds striped the room in soft golden shadow, but inside me, everything felt dark, a hollow echo of disbelief and betrayal I couldn't quite name yet. 2 years earlier, if someone had told me this would be my life, I'd have laughed. Back then, I was the woman with the neat garden and the open heart, the kind who baked cookies for the neighbors and remembered birthdays without fail. Daniel and I had been married for 9 years. He was a charming man, not the movie kind of handsome, but steady, with a dimple that appeared only when he was being sincere. We'd built what I thought was a safe life, a little suburban home outside Portland, a dog named Milo, and dreams of adoption after years of trying for a baby. But sometimes, safety isn't what it seems. Sometimes it's just silence before the storm. The first cracks in our marriage were small, almost invisible. Late nights at the office, phone calls he'd take on the porch, whispers that stopped when I entered the room. And I, ever the peacemaker, kept convincing myself that love meant patience, that trust meant silence. Until one night, I still remember the smell of rain on the driveway and the taste of cold coffee in my mouth. He didn't come home. By sunrise, I found out why. Her name was Amber, a coworker, a marketing assistant, younger, livelier. She'd laughed at his jokes the way I used to before life got too busy and love turned into routine. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. That wasn't me. I packed his clothes in a box, folded them neatly, and placed it by the door. He didn't even fight me. He just said, "I'm sorry, Claire," and left. Divorce came and went like a storm, messy, loud, and leaving everything damp and cold in its wake. After that, silence became my companion, until I met Julia. Julia appeared in my life like spring after a long winter. We met at a women's support group I'd reluctantly joined on my sister's insistence. She had this warmth about her, the kind that made you feel seen even when you wanted to hide. She was funny, spontaneous, and talked about her chaotic love life with a kind of humor that made everyone laugh. I liked her instantly. Soon she became my person. We spent weekends gardening, sharing recipes, and drinking wine while complaining about men who didn't deserve us. She once said, "If I ever find a man like Daniel, steady, mature, kind, I'll know I've hit the jackpot." I'd laugh then. Trust me, Jules, Daniel was a lesson, not a jackpot. We both laughed, and I believed it was just a joke. For the first time in a long while, I felt light again. Julia and I started a small catering business together. She was creative, I was organized. We made a good team. Our friendship was easy, natural. She knew about my past, my heartbreak, my quiet nights of loneliness. She knew how I took my coffee, black with the hints of cinnamon, and that I hated lilies because they reminded me of hospital corridors. In every way that mattered, she became family. So when she started seeing someone, I was genuinely happy for her. She mentioned him casually at first. "This man I met through a mutual friend," she'd say, twirling a strand of hair as she grinned. "He's older, thoughtful, kind of quiet, but there's something about him that feels safe." I remember smiling. "I'm glad, Jules. You deserve someone safe." She smiled back, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, a hesitation. But I brushed it off. We never spoke of his name, not once. Months passed, and she grew happier, lighter. She'd disappear for weekends, come back glowing. When I asked how things were going, she'd just blush and say, "He makes me feel like I'm home." I didn't press. Maybe because part of me still feared knowing too much about love or losing what peace I'd finally found. Until one Saturday morning, I got that invitation. The gold embossed one with my name written in her handwriting, full of affection and trust, and his name printed neatly beside hers. Daniel Carter, my ex-husband. The same man who once promised me forever and left me standing in the ruins of our plans. And the same woman who held me when I cried over him. I sat down on the kitchen floor, the letter trembling in my hands. The dog whined beside me, sensing something wasn't right. I could almost hear Julia's voice from our countless conversations, her laughter, her promises of loyalty, her words about friendship being sacred. And now she wanted me, to stand beside her as her maid of honor, to hold her bouquet, fix her veil, and watch her marry the man who'd once broken me. The audacity of it all left me breathless. But beneath the anger was something deeper, a kind of sorrow that only comes when two betrayals happen at once. The love that left and the friend who stayed just long enough to twist the knife. I remember whispering aloud, "Why, Julia? Why you?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. That was the moment I decided I needed to see her face. I needed to hear the truth from her own lips before I could even think about what to do next. So I picked up my phone and called her. When Julia picked up the phone, her voice sounded exactly as it always did, warm, lilting, slightly rushed. "Claire, I was just thinking about you. Did you get the invitation?" I stared at the window, sunlight pooling across the floorboards. "I did," I said slowly. "Julia, is this a joke?" There was a brief silence, so quiet I could hear her exhale, sharp and careful. "No," she said finally, "it's not a joke." My throat tightened. "Then you're serious. You're marrying Daniel." She didn't answer right away. I could picture her twisting that gold ring she wore, the one she always spun around her finger when she was nervous. "Yes," she said softly. "I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you." The irony almost made me laugh. "Hurt me?" I said, my voice trembling. "Julia, you're marrying my ex-husband." "I know," she whispered. "But please, Claire, listen. It just happened. We met at a conference months ago. We didn't even realize the connection at first. He told me about his ex-wife, but not your name. It wasn't until later that we connected the dots. And by then what?" I interrupted. "You were already in love?" The silence that followed was heavy. "I'm sorry," she said. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, but I wanted you to hear it from me. And I wanted you to know that I still value our friendship. That's why I asked you to be there. I thought maybe this could be our chance to heal." Her words were so soft, so pleading, that for a moment I forgot how cruel they sounded. I ended the call without another word. For days, I walked through my house like a ghost. The walls felt closer somehow, the rooms quieter. Every object carried a story. The couch Daniel and I picked out, the photograph Julia had taken of me laughing with flour in my hands, the little ceramic bird she'd given me last Christmas that still sat by the window. I wanted to smash them all, but I didn't. That wasn't who I was. Instead, I began to notice the small things I'd ignored before. Little clues that, in hindsight, had been screaming the truth. I remembered a night 3 months earlier. We were sitting on my porch, a bottle of rosé between us. Julia's phone had buzzed, and she'd smiled down at it like a teenager. I teased her. "Is that him, the mystery man?" She blushed, shaking her head. "Oh, just someone from work." But then she'd said something odd. "You know, Claire, sometimes love comes from the last place you expect, and it makes you question everything you thought you knew." I'd laughed then, not realizing that she was confessing without confessing. I remember her studying me afterwards, almost as if searching for permission. And another time, she'd helped me move an old photo album from the shelf. A picture of Daniel and me fell out. She'd picked it up, stared at it a little too long, and said quietly, "He looks kind." I thought she was just being polite. Now I knew better. One evening, about a week after the call, I found myself driving without destination. The radio was on low, the kind of soft jazz that fills silence but doesn't soothe it. My hands clenched the steering wheel as if holding it tighter could hold my thoughts in place. I passed by the old cafe Daniel and I used to visit every Sunday. And then I saw them, Julia and Daniel, through the glass window, sitting exactly where he and I used to sit. She was laughing, her head tilted back in that easy way of hers. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me, with that quiet admiration that once melted me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to walk in there, to make a scene, to demand how they could betray me so easily. But I didn't. I just sat in my car, engine running, tears sliding down my cheeks in silence. They didn't see me. And somehow that made it worse. I drove home with the taste of salt on my lips and a hollowness in my chest I hadn't felt even after my divorce. Because this wasn't just betrayal by a lover. This was betrayal by the one person I trusted enough to rebuild with. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked, the clock ticked endlessly, and my mind replayed every moment, every laugh, every shared secret. I thought of Julia's words. "I wanted you to be there so we could heal." How could she believe healing came from reopening the same wound? I got up, turned on the kitchen light, and poured myself a glass of water. The invitation still lay on the counter. The gold letters gleamed mockingly under the warm light. Without thinking, I picked it up and flipped it over. On the back, Julia had written a note in her looping cursive. "You've always been my inspiration, Claire. You taught me that love deserves a second chance. I hope you can be happy for me." Happy for her. The words stung like lemon on a cut. The next morning, I called my sister Rachel. She'd always been the fiery one, blunt, protective, unfiltered. When I told her everything, she let out a low whistle. Well, damn, that's some next-level betrayal. "Rachel, what do I do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You do nothing. You don't show up, you don't smile for pictures, and you sure as hell don't hold her bouquet. You walk away with your dignity. That's what you do." I wanted to agree, but something in me wasn't settled. Because silence, I'd already lived through that. And silence had cost me my marriage, my peace, my self-respect. This time, I needed something else. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew I couldn't just fade quietly into the background of their happiness. Not again. 2 nights later, I found myself scrolling through social media, something I rarely did anymore. Julia's posts were full of floral arrangements and captions like, "Counting down the days to forever." I stared at a picture of them together, him in his familiar navy shirt, her hand resting on his chest. And then I noticed it. a detail so small I might have missed it if I knew him so well. He was wearing the same wedding band I returned during our divorce, the same thin gold ring with the tiny engraving inside, "To see forever." Forever. My breath hitched. She didn't even know it. She didn't know that the symbol of her new love was still carrying the ghost of mine. That night, I made a decision. I would confront them both, but I wouldn't scream or cry or break. I would face them the only way I knew how, with calm, truth, and the quiet strength they'd both underestimated. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. Rain tapped against the windows in a slow rhythm, like an anxious heartbeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julia in white, radiant, smiling, holding Daniel's hand under a sky that once belonged to me. I wasn't going to ruin her wedding, but I also wasn't going to let them bury the truth under vows and champagne. So, the next morning, I dressed carefully, not in black, not in bitterness, but in calm defiance. A pale blue dress, soft curls pinned loosely, not to stand out, but to stand firm. When I arrived, the ceremony had already begun. The air smelled of roses and rain. Guests whispered politely as the music swelled and Julia appeared, breathtaking, fragile, unaware. She walked down the aisle toward Daniel, and I stood at the back unseen, watching as two chapters of my life prepared to merge into one story I didn't write. When the vows began, Julia's voice trembled slightly. "I never thought love could find me twice," she said, smiling at him. "But you showed me that hearts can heal even after they've been broken." A murmur of emotion rippled through the crowd. Daniel looked at her with that same quiet intensity, the same look he used to give me. My fingers tightened around the small envelope in my hand. Inside it was a copy of our old marriage certificate. Not to embarrass them, just to remind them that ghosts don't disappear just because we stop saying their names. After the ceremony, I stayed. Part of me wanted to see if either of them would approach me, to see if there was still an ounce of conscience left between them. The reception was held under a white tent. Laughter, clinking glasses, music that didn't fit the weight in my chest. Julia spotted me first. Her eyes widened, but then softened. She left Daniel's side and hurried toward me, her veil fluttering behind her like a guilty ghost. "Claire," she said, breathless, "you came." "I did," I said quietly. "I thought you'd want closure." Her smile faltered. "I'm so glad. Really, I didn't think you would. I was praying you'd come so we could move forward." "Julia," I cut her off gently. "Before you talk about moving forward, maybe you should know what's still behind you." She frowned, confusion flickering across her face. I reached into my purse and handed her the envelope. "What's this?" "Something that belongs to him. Or maybe to both of us." She opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the document and then froze. Her breath caught. "I don't understand. This is your marriage certificate?" "Yes, mine and Daniel's." She looked up, eyes wide. "But he told me, he said everything was finalized, that there were no strings left, that you what?" I said softly. "That I stopped existing?" Before she could answer, Daniel approached, holding 2 glasses of champagne. His smile faltered when he saw me standing there. "Claire." "Hello, Daniel. Beautiful wedding." He glanced at Julia, then at the envelope in her trembling hands. The color drained from his face. "Julia, I can explain." "Explain what, Daniel? That you're still wearing her ring?" The music had stopped. People were beginning to notice.
A hush spread like a ripple in water. Julia, listen, Daniel said, his tone low and pleading. It's not what it looks like. I meant to get a new ring. This one just had her name engraved inside it, she said sharply, her voice rising. You told me you never wore your old one. I stood there quietly, my heart pounding but my face calm. I told you once, Daniel, you can't build new love on old lies. He turned toward me, anger flickering in his eyes. Why are you here, Claire? To humiliate me? No, I said evenly. To remind you. You don't get to rewrite history just because it makes you uncomfortable. Julia was staring at him now, tears slipping down her cheeks. Is it true? You lied to me? He tried to reach for her, but she stepped back again, shaking her head. You said you loved me because I was honest, but you couldn't even tell me this? I took a deep breath. Julia, he's not the same man you think he is. And I don't say that to hurt you. I say that so you don't have to find out the hard way like I did. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tent was silent except for the soft patter of rain on the canvas. Finally, Julia looked at me. Not with anger, not even pity, but a kind of quiet devastation. I thought we were sisters. I never meant to betray you. I know, but you did. And now you'll have to live with that, the same way I had to live with the emptiness you left behind. I turned to leave, my heels sinking slightly into the wet grass. Behind me, I heard Julia sob, Daniel's voice calling after me, but I didn't stop. Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. The sky was gray, soft, forgiving. I walked to my car, opened the door, and took one last look at the venue. The glowing lights, the people pretending not to stare, the echo of vows that had already begun to unravel. Then, I drove away. For the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. Because the truth once spoken doesn't destroy you. It frees you. And somewhere in that quiet freedom, I finally understood. Closure isn't something they can give you. It's something you take back, piece by piece, until the weight of what happened no longer defines who you are.
When I look back now, I don't see a failed marriage or a broken friendship. I see a woman who loved deeply, trusted completely, and learned painfully what it means to let go. Life has a strange way of showing us who we really are. Sometimes it strips away everything we thought we needed, just so we can see that we were whole all along. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you called family, if you've ever smiled through a heartbreak because you didn't want the world to see you fall, then you know that kind of silence I lived in. It's heavy at first, but with time, that silence turns into strength. I used to wonder why it all happened. Why my best friend? Why my marriage? Why me? Now, I understand. Some storms come not to destroy you, but to clear your path. I didn't need to stand beside her at that wedding. I needed to stand beside myself. And that choice, quiet, private, unseen, changed everything. So if you're listening to my story tonight and you're holding on to someone who keeps breaking you, maybe this is your sign to finally let go. Not for revenge, not for closure, but for peace. Because peace is the most beautiful kind of justice there is. Would you have gone to that wedding? Or would you have walked away like I did? Tell me in the comments below. And if my story touched your heart, please subscribe for more true stories of love, betrayal, and the strength to begin again.